Britain warned that Ukraine would increase its long-range attacks on Russian territory. Poland suddenly deployed a mechanized division close to Kaliningrad. Why students across America demand an end to the war in Gaza. British commander, Ukraine will increase attacks deep into Russian territory. The British military commander said Ukraine is preparing to increase attacks deep into Russian territory after receiving long-range weapons from the West. Admiral Tony Radakin, commander of the British Armed Forces, said on April 25 that Ukraine is facing a difficult period due to Russia's attack. However, he said this did not reflect long-term trends that are more favorable for Ukraine. According to Radakin, new advantages include new military aid packages from the US and Europe, Ukraine's increasingly successful long-range raid campaign, and Russia's complete failure to prevent military exports. The Cup across the Black Sea. The US recently resumed military aid to Ukraine after nearly half a year of interruption. Over the past 6 months, the Ukrainian army has run out of ammunition and weapons, while Russian forces have stepped up their attacks, made progress, and continuously attacked the enemy with heavy artillery, missiles and aircraft. Unmanned aerial vehicle, UAV. To regain the initiative on the battlefield, Ukraine continuously asks the West to provide more high-tech long-range weapons. Ukraine has also repeatedly raided production and energy infrastructure deep within Russian territory, including oil refineries. In March, the U.S. secretly transferred the ATACMS missile variant with a range of 300 kilometers to Ukraine. However, President Joe Biden still asked White House officials to ensure Ukraine does not use this missile to attack Russian territory. Ukraine and the U.S. disagree over the raid on Russian oil refineries. Meanwhile, Admiral Radakin expressed no concern about Ukraine's raid campaign in Russian territory. When Ukraine has a long-range strike capability, its ability to organize deep penetration operations will become a feature of the conflict and certainly have an effect, he said. British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak on April 22 pledged more than $3.7 billion in aid to Ukraine. British officials also signed long-term contracts with defense companies, allowing the British Ministry of Defense to withdraw more weapons from its stockpile to transfer to Ukraine, including more than 1,600 anti-aircraft missiles and cruise missiles. Storm Shadow/Scalp-EG. Poland deployed a mechanized division close to Kaliningrad. Poland's latest move may increase tensions between this country and Russia. The Polish government continues to show a tough attitude towards Russia. Currently, Warsaw is preparing reserves and dividing its forces into 2 lines to protect the border opposite the Kaliningrad region of the Russian Federation. It is known that the head of the Warmian-Mazurian province, Mr. Radoslaw Król, recently visited the 16th Mechanized Division named Pomeranian, deployed in 2 levels with a combat formation in the direction of Kaliningrad. Mr. Król was appointed governor of Warmian-Mazurian province on December 23, 2023. But his motives for visiting advanced units of the Polish army still raise many questions. During the visit, I had the opportunity to learn about the division's mission and interact with the soldiers. Their dedication and professionalism deserve to be recognized at the highest level, this official wrote on X social network account, formerly Twitter, on April 24, with related photos. According to the announcement, during the meeting, assumptions about cooperation between local authorities and combat units in case of emergency were discussed. Mr. Król and the 16th Division are probably studying the deployment of combat units along the Polish-Russian border. The reason why students across the United States protested against the war in Gaza. Students at a series of American universities protested, demanding an end to the Gaza war and protesting the school's connections with Israel, which they considered supporting the war. The University of Southern California had to cancel its graduation ceremony on April 25, and leaders of many universities across the United States are extremely worried about the risk of having to make a similar decision next month, when the anti-war protest movement begins. Gaza spread among students nationwide. Protests supporting Palestine and the conflict in the Gaza Strip are taking place at dozens of universities across the United States, as students set up tents, take control of campus buildings, and ignore requests to disperse. Of the police. Some schools responded by calling the police to disperse crowds of students, leading to clashes and arrests on campus, while leaders of other schools tried to restrain themselves, waiting for a wave of protests. Cool down as the semester comes to an end. According to AP, these anti-war protests have their origins in the decades-long boycott, divestment and sanctions (BDS) movement, which opposes Israel's policies toward Palestinians. The movement heats up as fighting in the Gaza Strip enters its sixth month. On April 24, hundreds of students set up tents on the South Lawn on the campus of Columbia University in New York, waving Palestinian flags and chanting protest slogans against the genocide in Gaza. We want to show real action. The school should take action on what we are asking for. They should stop investing in this genocide, said Mahmoud Khalil, a student leading the protest at Columbia University, said. By noon that day, Columbia University leaders asked New York police to deploy forces to disperse the crowd and dismantle the tents, on the grounds that the protest clearly threatened the basic operations of the school. A total of 108 protesters were arrested that day. The police's strong actions against Columbia University students sparked anger at other American universities, causing protests to quickly flare up and spread. Student protesters call for a permanent ceasefire in Gaza, an end to U.S. military support for Israel, and demand that universities stop accepting investments from weapons manufacturers and corporate beneficiaries from the war, as well as amnesty for students and school staff disciplined or fired for participating in protests. The series of protests were coordinated by a coalition of student groups, often including local chapters of organizations such as Students for Justice in Palestine, SJP, or Jewish Voice for Peace, JVP. They coalesced into organizations such as the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, Anti-Racism Coalition, or the University of Michigan's Tahrir Alliance. American students also called on universities to cut ties with any businesses promoting Israel's military efforts in the Gaza Strip, and to stop accepting Israeli research funds for projects supporting the effort. Military service to this country, stop funding beneficiaries from Israeli companies or contractors, be transparent and disclose the intended use of funds received from Israel. Student councils at several schools also passed resolutions calling for an end to investment and academic cooperation with Israel, including the student unions of Columbia University, Harvard Law School, Rutgers University, and American University. At many schools, protesting students said they did not know the extent of cooperation between the school and Israel, but demanded that the leadership end any sponsorship and investment related to Tel Aviv. In fact, universities with large endowments will spread money across many investments, making it difficult or impossible to investigate the destination of these cash flows. U.S. media said that the Ministry of Education requires this country's universities to declare gifts and contracts from foreign sources, but there is a problem of incomplete declaration. Universities even circumvent the law by transferring money through private funds that operate on behalf of the school. Data from the Department of Education shows that about 100 American universities declared gifts and contracts from Israel, worth a total of $375 million, over the past 20 years. But there is little information about the exact origin of the money and how they are used. Several MIT students published the names of several researchers at the school who received more than $11 million from the Israeli Ministry of Defense for projects that could help control unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, and missile defense. 10 years ago, MIT administrators did not respond to American media's request for comment. The students said they wanted universities to be held accountable for any role in supporting the Israeli military. They are forcing us, the students, to be complicit in this genocide, said Quinn Perian, a second-year MIT student who leads a group of Jewish students calling for resistance to the war. Meanwhile, University of Michigan students accused the school of transferring more than $6 billion to investors benefiting from Israeli companies and contractors, demanding an end to this investment flow. They say that money flows to companies that produce UAVs, fighters and surveillance technology to serve Israeli checkpoints in Gaza. The University of Michigan administration said there are no direct investments with Israeli businesses, while indirect investments made through the fund account for only 1% of the school's $18 billion endowment. The school board rejected protesters' calls for divestment, insisting they would continue to protect investments from political pressure. In addition to calls for divestment, students at Harvard University and Yale University also asked the school to be more transparent about money flows related to Israel. This is also one of the main requirements of students at Emerson University in Boston.